Hello, I'm Brigantia of Blackbird of Blackbird's Brew. Happy Saturday, and this is an edition of Loki in Fiction. We're going to be looking at Loki's Saga, which is a novel of the Norse gods by J.D. Foslin. From time to time, I will read novels that feature Loki as the main character. If you've been following the channel, you've probably seen a couple of these videos already. Oftentimes, these stories will be telling the mythology through Loki's point of view, or they'll just be borrowing the characters and creating something else new. The results are all very it's a pretty mixed bag. Some of these books are pretty good, and I like to draw attention to them for what's fun about them. Other books are absolutely ghastly. Most are in between. Loki's Saga by J.D. Foslin is, in my view, absolutely excellent, and it has an interesting take on the lead up to the death of Balder, but also why the death of Balder took place and the nuance. It's been interesting for me. Now, I suspect that most people who work with Loki pepper him with questions from time to time. I know I certainly have. Usually, I'll get a hint that I'm looking at a story too literally and that I need to focus more so on the lesson and what it teaches, what I can use and apply for it for my own life. However, from time to time, he'll give me a different response, and it could be summed up with the words, "It had to be done." Obviously, that reaction attracts my attention, and thus far I have not gotten in much of a follow up. But it does get me to thinking, and I suspect that getting me to think more is three-fourths of the point. The issue of Balder's death and the reasons for it have always been intriguing, and I've always felt there had to be more to the story, and that those aspects of it just hadn't survived the ages. To put Loki's role in Balder's death down to just a mere whim, that doesn't square with the deity that I'm beginning to get to know. Chaos does not equate a lack of purpose or a lack of strategy. Now, revenge as a motive is more plausible, as Baldur's death does take place after Fenrir is bound, Jormungandr is cast into the seas of Midgard, and Hel is sent to reign over Helheim. Mortal parents separated from their children have been known to take extraordinary action, so how much more so would a deity be inclined to seek retribution in such an event? And that brings me to the novel Loki's Saga, which suggested an entirely different reason and motivation for what took place. Now, I'm not presenting this as divine revelation or anything even remotely of that kind. Merely, I want to draw attention to this because the author may have stumbled onto a possibility that could explain a great deal if it bears any resemblance to the origins of the tale. At least it's something for our brains to chew on. Now, from the lore, we know that Balder was universally beloved by all, gods and men. But we don't know why this was exactly, and the assumption has generally been that Balder was just that great of god. The author in the novel presented a different hypothesis, that Balder's popularity and his influence was a manifestation of his power, and it was actually a manipulation of others. This brings us to the illusion of perfect peace. It is no secret that the gods have had many a quarrel amongst themselves of varying degrees of severity. Obviously, that has caused problems, so it's no surprise that there would be discussion about how to bring about peace, what mechanism would be required to bring it about, what it would look like in practice, and all that. Balder presents himself and his ideas as the solution. He was generally well liked, but as he gained influence, people seemed to almost be under his thrall. Except Loki, of course, who was always hither and thither, and so he wasn't exposed to Balder's influence as much. Now, over time, Loki notices that the gods seem to be at peace, but none of them are really acting like themselves, and they seem to be neglecting their duties and their responsibilities, even their interests. No one is paying attention when he voices these observations, but it's not just that he's being ignored, but it's the way the gods are ignoring him, almost as it's a compulsion to ignore him, and this puts Loki on high alert. Loki sees that this peace has not only put the gods out of balance, but that it's actually affecting the seasons and the people on Midgard, with catastrophic results because the seasons weren't moving along, and no one was doing what needed to be done to survive. This alarms Loki enough to take the matter to Odin, who is just as enthralled to Balder as the rest of the gods. He manages to snap the Allfather out of the influence just long enough for Odin to issue an order to Loki to kill Balder, for the sake of everything, even though that act would cost Loki dearly, and he walked into it knowing what it would cost. And while it was time to do the necessary thing to redress this, Loki doesn't want to take this drastic action. But he's seen the damage that's being done. It's thrown all of creation out of whack. He knows that this isn't actually peace. It is just stagnation. It is decay. And Loki knows that everyone else is literally under Baldur's spell. And, this can't just be farmed out to someone else. So he's resigned that there's no other way. Loki sees the deed done. And then he and his family, of course, suffer the raft the rest of the Aesir. And then there's a temporary reprieve in which the natural order regains some of its equilibrium, but a chain reaction has already begun and Ragnarok is on its way. Now, in due course, Loki escaped his punishment, and then all the events of Ragnarok unfold. But at the very end, after, everything's essentially over, Loki and Odin had both died. They found themselves conscious and stirring around Yggdrasil, and they are welcomed by Honir. All three of them had essentially been restored. Odin even had both of his eyes back. They were young, they were strong, they were vital. And while Honir was speaking with other spirits around Yggdrasil, Odin turns to Loki and asks, what gift will he give to the children of Ask and Embla? And this is something that he asked Loki at the very beginning of creation, because in this story, at the beginning, it was Honir, Odin, and Loki who brought everything about. Then, after this, the three gods link their fingers together, and for a moment that's described as feeling like eternity but still passionate in a flash, everything is reborn. The gods, the worlds, everything, the entire system is rebooted and reborn. And in this post Ragnarok existence, real balance is actually restored. Not just a semblance of it, not just part way, it is actually fully restored. And the gods are at peace with themselves, but also within themselves. And this isn't in a forced way. It's not artificial. It's not having an effect that's throwing the rest of the nine worlds or each other out of balance. There's just a mutual acceptance and appreciation for the necessary role that everyone plays, and that people are as they are, and they must be as they are. And the only one who is missing is Balder, who is in Helheim, and he's being looked after by the goddess Hel. So I have a theory that if you scratch an idealist, you will find a tyrant lurking beneath the skin, and from my reading, that is the lesson of Balder in this particular rendition of the story. Balder was selling the idea of utopia, and the result was catastrophe and depression, and the cost of removing that poison from the landscape was unspeakably high. We have plenty of modern day examples of people preaching various forms of utopia, and of the damage that is done and left in their wake. Nature, including human nature, operates the way it does for a reason. Attempting to override that nature, or deny it, or punish people out of it leads to disaster. Every single time. We can't solve our problems by attempting to defy nature. It will only increase our own suffering. And this novel highlights the role of the outsider of society as well, the person who never really fits in easily or has the annoying habit of saying things that are true that other people are only thinking. There are times when that person, that weirdo outsider who never seems to get along with anyone, that is the one person who is capable of seeing what's happening and all of the consequences of it. So then it falls to this outsider and to the misfit, the person who wouldn't just go with the flow and get along with people, to be the one who actually takes corrective action. And more often than not, they don't get much in the way of thank you for their efforts, even if what they are doing is for the long-term good. This says something about the character flaws of the average person, doesn't it? At least I think it does. But that's the lesson that really sticks out in my mind. The necessity of doing what needs to be done because it is necessary in and of itself, not because you're doing it because you think you're going to get a reward, or knowing that you're going to do it and knowing that it is going to cause you trouble. That's a very hard pill to swallow, and it requires love to willingly make that kind of sacrifice. That's not a small ask, especially if the people stepping up to the plate aren't particularly popular with the average person, and they know they're not. This is not going to increase that popularity at all. It is very difficult to look past the disapproval of others and say, I still care enough about you to want to do something that is for the overarching good, even if you don't like me. So, as a book, I think this is well worth the time to read. I think the author captured the essence of the gods' personalities. The writing is good, the pacing is excellent, and the overall message is one of hope and even redemption. So, if you decide to read it, I'd love to hear about your impressions. So, let me know in the comments or come see us at Blackbird's Brew on Discord. There's a link to join in the description box below, and you can tell me everything that you thought of this particular book. I would be very curious to see if you had the same takeaway, a different takeaway, or you thought of other nuances. Just let me know. I love storytelling and I love talking about it. But I think that's it for now, so I will see you in the next one. Bye.